Hi guys, you're welcome to another tutorial. Now today we'll be learning how to make this mermaid skirt with front slit, and it's going to have a tail at the back. So this is one I've made. I'm just trying to show you guys the what we'll be learning how to make today, then before we get down to the drafting part. So if you find this video interesting, at the end of it, kindly give me a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. Let's start drafting, guys. So this is me marking a line on the top of my paper to indicate the starting line. From that, I mark the full length of this skirt. So since her dress is 66 inches from the shoulder line, I minus her waist length of 18 inches. So the remaining length is what I put as the full length. Or you can take your client's measurement from the waist to where they want the full length to get to. That is how you get the full length of your dress. From that, I put the hip length of 9 inches from the waist, and I also square it up. After that, I'm going to indicate the waist and the hip. Then from the waistline, I mark 19 inches as the nail length. Now measure your client's nail length. If it's 24, minus 4 inches from it. Then you put the remaining one. If it's 23, minus 4 inches from it, and you mark. So on the waistline, on the hip line, on the nail and the hemline, I put 4 inches as the nipple to nipple measurement. That's the dart line, and I went ahead to mark half inch on both sides. Then from the waist, I went down by 6 inches. That is where the dart will stop. Now, if you don't used to put that on your skirts, you can ignore that dart. Then on the waist, I put the round waist measurement of 30 divided by 4. I replaced the darts of 1 inch, and I also added 1.5 inch for seam allowance. I did the same thing for the hip, 44 divided by 4 plus the darts, plus the sewing allowance. Now to get our round nail, if you did not measure your client's round nail, whatever the hip gives you, minus 5 inches from it, or 6 inches, but I normally do 5. Then you indicate it. Then I also replace the seam allowance. I hope you understand. So if it is 40, when you minus 40 minus 5, you have 35. Divide the 35 by 4. That is what you put on your nail, round nail. So this is me connecting it. So whatever my nail gives me, I measure it, and I added 10 inches to it. That is the flail length, the mermaid length, and I also replaced the 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Then I went ahead to use my ruler to connect it. So we have our front skirt pattern ready. Now I'm going to be cutting. After cutting, we're going to place this on another paper for us to cut the back. After placing it on a paper for the back, I'm going to be extending the hip line towards the back. Now I left some allowance before I placed the front on it. I also extended the nail length. On the waist measurement, I'm going to be adding 1 inch for zip allowance. On the hip, I'm going to be adding 1.5 inch. That's for our sitting, our butt allowance. From the hip measurement, I went down by 6 inches, and I'm going to be connecting the lines. So from the waist, I connected the 1 inch to the 1.5. Now on the hip, I connected it to the 6 inches. Now that 6 inches, there's no allowance there. Can you see it? I just connected it to from the hip to the 6 inches. Now we're going to be cutting it all the way down, so straight down. There's no zip allowance at all from the 6 inches down to the full length of the skirt. This is how I normally create my butt allowance, so that the back, even if you don't have hip, is going to fit properly at the down part. Then if you have hip, it's going to make your hip more pronounced. Now from this front, for the back, I'm going to be going down by 9 inches. You can do from 8.5 to 10, so that we can get our tail extension of the back. Then just use your free hand, to connect it like that. After that, I'm going to be cutting it. Can you see the way I'm cutting? Now let's cut the upper from the skirt then to the back. So we have our front and our back mermaid skirt ready. Now transfer all your darts, that line to the back. The dart, you transfer it to the back. Also the dart length, transfer it also to the back. Okay guys, so I dropped the back and we're going to be working on the front. Now bear it in mind that this front pattern is cut on fold. I only use it to cut the back while folded like this, but the front is cut on fold. Can you see it? So what I'm going to do now is I'll replace all the dart of one side to the other side, so that we can cut our slit. Now replace all the dart and all the lines, and it also depends on where your client wants their slit opening to be, so you have to ask them. Then also ask them for the slit length. So let's say I'm using the knee length of this dress as the slit length. I went down by 7 inches, and that 7 inches I'm going to be marking 0.25 because I don't want much opening, but you can do half inch on that part. Then towards the end here, you can do 1 inch, but towards the end here, I did half inch, and I connected it to the corresponding that intake first. That is the 0.25. From that, I went ahead to use my curve ruler to just give it a slight curve up to where I want the slit opening to stop. So can you see what I'm doing? That is how I curve it. So you can just decide to do however opening size that you want, but it shouldn't pass 1 inch on the hem line. Then from there, I'm cutting off all the darts. Can you see how I'm cutting off? Yes, I'm cutting off all the darts up to the down part. So this is how our slit is going to be. Now I'm going to place it on the fabric. Now this fabric is not cut on fold. Can you see? It is just a single fabric, and I added half inch to the part where we are going to be joining to the other part, and I went ahead to notch all my darts. I notched them, both the hip line and everything. I notch. Then I'm going to cut the second part. So also place the second part also, and add half inch to the other side. I added it. Can you see how I added half inch? So that when you join, you have your accurate measurement. So let's now come to the back pattern. So this back, now we are going to be doing a slash and spread on this back. So what I did for the front, I just make sure I have the knee length for the back. Then after that, I went ahead to still mark our dart line all the way to the down. So just transfer what you have for the front on the back. Now for our slashing, I divided in between the dart line. I divided it, then towards the side seam, I minus the seam allowance, and I divided what is left. Now I'm going to be putting the same measurements of that part on the down part of the hemline. So this is me just measuring the same measurement, and I'm going to be rolling a straight line connecting it. After that, we are going to be slashing it. So I'm going to slash up to the nail, and I'll stop. I'll slash the other side. Now I'm slashing the one going to the side seam. Yeah, then I'll stop. So I'm going to open the center back side. I'll slash like that. I won't cut it through. I will also slash the one going to the side seam. And I'll slash like that. I will not cut it through. Now I'm going to slash the middle of our dart line. Can you see how I'm slashing? I decided to slow down the video so that you see what I'm doing at that point. So I'm going to slash one to this other side, and I'll slash the second one to the other side. So that is how I got my slash, and I'm going to be placing this now on the fabric to cut. So when you place it on the fabric, it depends on how plenty your material is. That will determine the inches you're going to give in between. After folding the fabric into two, and I place my back pattern on it, so I space 3 inches. That is what I space, 3 inches. So we are going to be cutting it on the lace now. Guys, I've gone ahead to cut on the lace, and I gummed the bridal satin to the lace. I gum with hemi gum, and I added extra length of lace to this because the skirt is way longer than the lace that we have. So I joined at the tip. Can you see it? And I went ahead to cut lining. Now this is the front. I'm just going to show you the front before I show you the lining. So this is the front as well. I've gone. So this is the lining, guys. I only cut half lining from the nail. I measured 9 inches down, so I cut half lining. But if you have enough fabric, you can cut towards the the length, leaving some inches from the hemline. Now we are going to be turning the lining. Before we turn, I fold the down parts of the lining so that it will be very neat. Then I'm going to place it on it, and I'm going to be sewing with just 0.25 on the front side. Then the side seam I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch. Now guys, before you sew, you have to sew in your dart allowance. Sewing your dart allowance for both the fashion fabric and the lining. All the parts where you have dart allowance, you have to sew it in. After then, for the back also, I'm going to be hemming the down part of the lining, and I would also turn it with 1/2 inch on both sides. So let's go and sew and iron. After sewing, guys, this is how it is. I'm going to be turning everything so that I can give it a good press. I've joined all the darts, allowance and all of that. This is me just showing you this process. Then you flip it over, turning it to the other side. I did the same thing for both the front as well, and I'm going to be giving it a good press. Now I have given it a very good press. It is looking very neat, and we are going to be joining the front piece now together. So you place it on it. Now if you are cutting this, on the braille satin first, you can do it to give it 1 inch allowance on this front side. If you feel half inch will be too small for you. Now I measured my slit length. I later used 16.5 inches for this slit length because I just had to test it on my body and see if the length is short or long enough. So it was looking long, so I reduced it to 16.5. Then that is where I'm going to be sewing it to. Then I'm going to be using my hemming gum to fold in the remaining allowance all the way to the down part, and I would iron it. I hope you understand. Like I said, I'm not using a full lining, so I'll weave, then I'll iron the part that is exposed. So for the back, guys, I'm going to be placing it on each other, and we're going to be joining the zip allowance. So I added 1 inch zip allowance. So when I was turning into the lining, I turned with 0.25 to where the lining stop. So what I have left is 0.75, but from where the lining stop, I continue with the 1 inch. I hope you understand. Now this is it. I've gone ahead to join the front. Can you see it? So that is where I want the slit length to be, and this is how it is. And I told you I'm going to be folding this by the end of this skirt tutorial. I'm going to be folding it in, and I would iron it. I did the same thing for the back also. I sewed the zip and I ironed. Now I'm going to be teaching you guys how I normally do fitting for my dresses, for all my garments. Now let's write down the waist measurement of this client is 30. Our hip is 43.5. Then I need a knee for 3.5 minus 5. What I have left is 38.5 inches. So we have the 3 measurement that we need ready. Yeah, that is 38.5. Now that is the first thing you take note of. Now the next thing is, since our front pattern is folded into two, can you see it? We are going to be taking our waist measurement now. So place your tape and measure whatever it gives you. You are going to times it by 2 or plus it together. So if it is 8 inches, that will be 8 times 2 will make it 16. Now I'm going to write W as waist, then I will write 16. I'm going to put the plus sign because we'll be plussing front and back together. The next thing is to measure the hip length. So I'm using 9 inches for the hip length. Now for the knee length, I'm using 19.5. By the time I join half inch on the upper part, I have 19 inches left. Now I'm going to be taking the hip measurement now. So place your tape just the way you see me doing like that, and you measure it up to where the lining is. So whatever it gives you, you are going to times it by 2. Since our front is folded into 2, and the back 2 later will be folded into 2, that will be into 4. So for the knee also, fold it the way you see me. Place your tape like that, measure it to where your lining stop, and you are going to be timesing by 2. Now also write it down, write the measurement down. So that is the 3 measurements we need. Now I took the back, and I'm going to be doing the same thing I did for the front for the back. Now this back, my measurement is not going to get to the zip allowance. It's going to stop where my seam is, that place where you see my hand touching. Yes, so you measure it, whatever it gives you there, you are going to times it by 2, and you are going to be plussing it. Now on the waist measurement, I told you we are going to be plussing. So the first thing is plus the waist, you plus it to the front on. Also do the same thing for the hip measurements. Measure it, whatever it gives you, to where your seam is. Yes, so we are going to also times it by 2, and you're going to be plussing it on the hip measurement of the front. So do the same thing for the knee as well. Also, whatever it gives you, plus it. Yes, so now we are going to now do the main calculation now. So for the waist, guys, plus the two of the front and back together. So what measurement it will give you, you will now write it down. Now minus it from the actual client's measurements. Then whatever it gives you, divide it by 4. So you have your seam allowance. So come to the hip measurements plus the front and back hip measurement together. Then the measurement it gives you minus the actual hip measurement you have of the clients. Do you understand? So the what is now remaining, you now divide it by 4. That will now serve as the allowance you are going to be using for the hip. Now we'll come to the knee measurements. So for the knee measurement plus the two of front and back together, now go to the write it down, then now go to the knee measurement that you have before, minus it from what that one gives you. So what is left, divide it by 4. That will now be your knee measurements. Now this is what I do for all my garments, and it is perfect on their body. Now we are going to be putting that measurement on our dresses. So for the waist, I flip it to the other side because that is where my hand I normally sew on. Now I'm going to be transferring the line to the other side so that I can put in my measurements. I hope you see what I'm doing. So guys, for the waist is giving me 0.8. I write it down. For the knee I have 1 inch. Sorry, for the hip, for the knee I have 1.25. Now what the knee give me is what I'm going to be using for the rest of the skirt. So I did the same thing for the front. I put in the measurements, I extend what I have from the nail to the hem line. So this is very simple. Now you're going to be placing front and back on each other, and I'm going to be joining it with the allowance. Then I'm going to iron it.